Hi, I'm Brad Dacus.
And I'm Kyle Campbell.
Welcome to Faith and Law.
We're breaking down political and legal issues of the day through a biblical lens.
Hi, I'm Brad Dacus. Welcome to Faith and Law. We in the United States have seen government become very hostile towards institutions of faith, people of faith, particularly over the last 4 years. You really can't help but notice it. It's been very, very obvious, very blatant. Well, that's why we're really glad to see this administration, the Trump administration, decide to do something about it. Specifically, they are forming a White House Faith Office. This department is going to be looking into bias in government against Christians specifically. It's real important because we know firsthand that there has been tremendous discrimination when dealing with employees and policies regarding people of faith. We at Pacific Justice have had to take on a lot of cases specifically defending individuals in the military or working for the federal government or other government agencies where they're told, you have to compromise your faith or you lose your job. You have to take a controversial vax that violates your religious beliefs or you're fired. Well, you know what? We've been working on that. So we're very delighted to see the administration looking at this very seriously. But there's something else he's done too, which I think is really notable. And that is he's asked the Attorney General to step in and start a task force to investigate, specifically investigate actions by agencies with policies that have been hostile towards Christians and people of faith. Let me give you some examples. One is dealing with the Department of Justice itself. We know that they have been very bigoted and discriminatory when it comes to how they decide to enforce the law. For example, when it comes to individuals demonstrating in front of churches or doing violence against churches, we have seen very little, if anything, done to protect churches under the FACE Act. Yet, they've had no problem using that same statute, the FACE Act, to go on a witch hunt against Christians, pastors, ministers who are counseling and ministering in front of abortion clinics. It's a grotesque double standard and a blatant hostility and bigotry towards Christians and people of faith. Then we've got the IRS. Oh yes, the IRS. I know personally, firsthand, ministries, organizations that have been targeted for auditing, not because they were randomly chosen. Oh no, blatantly picked out because of their Christian beliefs or because of their conservative or biblical world view. It's not even up for grabs as far as whether or not it's been biased or random. It's very biased, very blatant, and I'm very glad to see this being one of the agencies that's going to be investigated very, very closely. They're going to find a lot of garbage, a lot of bigotry and discrimination against Christians and people with a Christian biblical worldview. Finally, the FBI. The FBI, it's supposed to be neutral, right? I remember growing up, I always thought of the FBI as the friend of everyone who is a law-abiding citizen. Not anymore. The FBI has used their energy for political purposes, not just against the President Trump and his administration, blatantly and unjustly, but also using it against moms and dads as school board members, coming out with a policy saying parents that raise their voice in a threatening manner as they so deem it are going to be considered domestic terrorists. Since when does the FBI get involved in school board meetings? Well, it's when they decided to use their power to oppress conservative biblical worldviews. Well, needless to say, we at Pacific Justice Institute are ecstatic that this administration is doing something about it. And his track record has been, from his first term into his second, an administration that doesn't just say things. He actually does what he says he's going to do. So needless to say, we're very excited about this moving forward, and we're looking forward to doing everything we can to complement those efforts to further religious freedom. Now, I'd like to welcome to the program someone who's written a very interesting book entitled Deprogramming Democrats. Lisa Ekman, welcome to the show. Glad to have you on the program. Now let's start off talking about your book, Deprogramming Democrats. I understand it addresses how ideology is molded and transformed by people because of their political party. They're not really realizing how they're being necessarily brainwashed. But for you, you had a turning point that you experienced where your eyes were opened up and you decided to take a second look at the deprogramming that you were experiencing yourself. Tell us more about that.
There were two things that happened, and thank you so much for having me, I should say first, on Faith and Law. And there are two things that happened. The first was my own experience with the medical system with my parents, and where I really got a little bit shaken at what our medical, I call it our sick care system, is designed for. And so there were some cracks in it after that. But then when the COVID pandemic hit, and I started to see that our government was giving advice that just didn't make any sense, especially in light of what I learned when I was trying to help my mother with her fight with stage 4 cancer. Just as an example, locking us in our houses when one of the best things you can do to keep yourself healthy is get natural vitamin D from the sun. And so I saw that was happening, but really the turning point for me was when all of our First Amendment rights were under attack without even so much as a discussion about it. And I think it's important to remind everyone who's watching that our First Amendment guarantees a lot of things. It guarantees our right to associate, our right to assemble, our right to speak, of course, which is what we mostly hear about, but then lastly, our right to worship where and when we please without government interference. And when all of those came under attack, and I saw people who were asking, for example, in the Great Barrington Declaration, just for a rational discussion about risks versus benefits and who really needs to be protected, and they got censored, and some of the folks who signed it actually got canceled, and some of the doctors who signed it were getting reviewed by their medical boards. That was too much. But I think that on top of the fact that my boyfriend at the time was asking all of these questions and looking at alternate news sources and coming up with a very different perspective than I had, and we were fighting. And he kept telling me, just go look yourself, do your own research, prove me wrong. So on the one hand, I have these people that I've trusted my whole life censoring people and shutting down any kind of rational discussion. And on the other hand, all these other people saying, no, go look for yourself, do your own research. And he asked me a question that I just couldn't avoid. Part of the challenge for me in changing my perspective on this was that I believed in our government institutions, and I couldn't believe that they would be doing this without the data and evidence to support it. And he asked me this question. He said, Lisa, if they'll poison our water, what won't they do? And I couldn't come up with an answer to that question. And I said, and he said, well, go look for yourself. And finally I said, I will. And then I started my research, and my life has never been the same after that.
Now today, many Americans, including people from the left and the right, find themselves being controlled by the media and media bias. What degree do you think that independent media sources and other platforms can play a role in basically challenging this kind of blatant media bias that has frustrated so many Americans?
An extremely important role. I don't think it can be overstated how important it is. The biggest way that they have controlled, one of the main things necessary for indoctrination is information restriction, and that is not letting individuals hear about alternative perspectives. And through narrative control, due to the fact that There are only 6 companies, basically, down from over 50 that own any media, and that in this country now. Then that includes not just TV, newspapers, magazines, but it includes video games. It includes every social media platform. So only 6 people are controlling that, and when they control the narrative through those 6 companies. And this is why you will hear, for example, on today when we're recording this, everyone's calling what's going on in the government a constitutional crisis. Everyone is using the exact same terms. So if you look at any mainstream media, that's all you're hearing. Elon Musk is the new president. He's a threat. This is a coup, and we have a constitutional crisis. So the ability to turn to platforms like Rumble, platforms like X, independent media, podcasts like Faith and Law, to get alternative perspectives so that it breaks the stranglehold on information that and the narrative control that the establishment used to have. I think that we have reached, and with President Trump, I think we have an opportunity to reach an inflection point where we take control of our country back and restore it to its constitutional origins and return it to the state. And that never would have happened without independent media, independent journalists, independent voices, and alternative media platforms.
Now, you discuss how young people at universities are being pushed and pressured into ideological conformity. What role do you think churches or organizations or even parents can play to help counterbalance this ideological conformity that's taking place all across American campuses?
I think that's a great question. I think the first one is that at university, I would advise any parent, just as a side note, to really question whether university is the right choice for your child. I think to make America great again, we need people who will make things, build things, and fix things again. And we don't need that many people with political science and gender studies degrees. So I would say that first of all. But as far as churches and organizations, I think that they can provide alternate education around issues. Free, for example, courses on the Constitution, what religious freedom means, what all of those types of things. And, looking at potentially forming your own universities, also looking at how you can support students while they are in university, providing community and ability to be around like-minded people in an environment that is not online. One of the things that is really challenging, I was at an event and had 3 students come up to me and explain how, and they were conservative students, and how challenging it was, and they felt very afraid to speak up. And, because if 9 out of 10 of professors at universities are left-leaning, which is the case, you want to graduate, you want to get good grades, so how do you speak up? And I encourage them to look in their community to find organizations and to find activities that they don't have to broadcast while they're on campus, but that align with their own values, and so that they can network and develop community that and churches and organizations like the Pacific Justice Institute can play a very large role in creating those type of community organizations and community opportunities for young conservatives to interact, build networks, have internships, all of those kind of things to set them and to maintain their own values while still being able to pass and graduate with a degree.
Thank you, Lisa. That is such great information, and I hope you all can check out her book, Deprogramming Democrats, really covering a lot of important topics that people of faith and people who want to see our nation thrive are questioning and dealing with right now. And on that topic, I want to talk about this incredible cultural shift that we are experiencing. Now, here at Faith and Law, of course, we talk about how faith intersects with the law, and culture is a huge part of that. we've had a massive pendulum swing over the last, several years. We've seen it happen with 8 years of Obama, swinging dramatically to 4, furious and fast years of Donald Trump in his first term, where things got shaken up a lot. A lot of his work was also hindered and slowed. And then we had another huge pendulum swing back with Joe Biden in charge. And what we've just come out of is 4 years of legislating and lawfare, and an administration that really took things to an extreme in terms of targeting religious freedom and people of faith. Well, now here we go. It's swinging back again. And along with seeing this political kind of seismic shift happening, we're seeing it culturally, and it's good. You want some good news today? All right, well, we're going to talk about it. What we're seeing right now is really this shift that we have not seen in a long time. Of course, we change presidents, we change administrations, and if everyone has its own theme, its own tone, the work they want to focus on, and issues as a nation that we're dealing with at that time. But what is happening right now is that we're having revival. I know a lot of people have questioned, are we going to have revival? Are we in a time of revival? And I truly believe that, as a generalist and looking at things globally and nationally, really focusing on how culture plugs into our world as a law-abiding country, as a nation that has the greatest constitution of any nation on earth. I see this from a higher level and all of these pieces coming together. We are in a time of revival. Now, that's good news, but it also means we've got to take advantage of this. We've got 4 short years of Donald Trump 2.0. He has done so much already in just a handful of weeks to promote our religious freedom, to reinforce our First Amendment rights to worship as we please in this country, and to establish a faith office that we've talked about on this show before, and really make sure that Christians are protected and that our policies and our laws reflect that. So it's an important time. Things are going in the right direction, but we have that responsibility as well to make sure that now's the time that we speak up, that we educate ourselves, that we come together as a faith-based community, that we work together, not at cross purposes, that we support the work going on in Washington. It can be hard to do sometimes. Not everything that comes out of the White House or our other federal agencies we're super pleased with, and that's okay. It's not all going to be perfect, but we need to work together to make sure that we make hay while the sun is shining, and the sun's shining right now on people of faith. We just saw this at the Super Bowl. Lauren Daigle is performing. Donald Trump gets cheered. Taylor Swift gets booed. We are coming back to church. We are having these incredible gatherings of young people who are just 10, 20,000 at a time, filling spaces and worshiping to a point where people can't get them to leave. The energy is so high. We've got a lot of believers in positions of true power in our country, and that's having a tremendous ripple effect to other nations as well. So we are truly coming back to being the shining city on the hill, and it's a really important time to grab hold of this opportunity. The door is being opened to us, and we've got to run through it. And there are a number of ways that we can do that. So first and foremost, keeping ourselves informed. Now, you guys have heard this from me before, but it can sometimes be a little tricky to track with the news. It can be depressing or just downright overwhelming. Donald Trump is working at breakneck pace. But find those platforms that you like. Maybe it's Politically Basic, maybe it's PJI, it's Faith and Law. It's definitely PJI and Faith and Law. And some of these people that you can follow on social media who are giving you real, truthful content and kind of aggregating all of this news for you. So that can be coming through maybe a larger corporate news platform if there's one that you like and trust. But utilize social media to your advantage and make sure that that algorithm is giving you all of the accounts that align with what you believe as a person of faith. So that's one way we've got to stay informed and know what's going on. We have to have discernment too. There are a lot of forces out there who don't like this cultural shift happening. There's been a great effort over the last 4 years to silence Christians, to keep us from church, to attack us, to utilize lawfare against Christians. And while that is slowing down because of what's coming out of this new administration, those efforts are still afoot, and there are still people who want to silence Christians as much as they can. So utilize discernment, but speak out boldly, operate boldly. Make sure that you are getting yourself to church or even streaming it online if you can. Because what we need now is an infusion of truth, and that comes from the Bible. That's our guiding force that's going to help us navigate these tricky cultural times. And get involved civically. I cannot emphasize this enough. It might seem like the barrier to entry to having a life in politics is so high. It's really not. You can start small, start at your local level. Your church can help you with this. Pacific Justice Institute can definitely help you with this. It might even be going to law school. You know, Brad is committed to speaking personally to anyone who is considering law school and has questions about it. Again, it can seem intimidating. It's not. Get out there and make steps to fulfill the purpose that God has for your life. Now, again, culturally, we're seeing some challenges. The 10 Commandments is a great example of this. We're trying to implement policy across the United States to publicly display the 10 Commandments, which used to be displayed publicly everywhere. And it's coming up against a lot of opposition. So your prayers are needed. We ask you for them. It's passed in Louisiana. It's gotten hindered in South Dakota. Again, those forces are trying to stop it. But our Constitution and our laws are based on the 10 Commandments. We live and operate within those 10 Commandments every day. They should be publicly displayed. And we will petition heaven that that will be able to happen. So thank you guys for following along. Make sure you catch every episode of Faith and Law. We're going to be talking policies. We're going to be talking about everything that is really breaking and happening culturally, politically, and legally as people of faith and for what matters to you. So make sure you're following along. And follow on social media so that you can reach out and let us know what you want us to break down for you too.
Well, Kyle, thank you very much for that important update regarding House Bill 71 there in Louisiana. Now, let's take a look at the Bible and what it says our attitude should be as we face these challenges to our freedoms, our liberties, and our challenges to express ourselves from a biblical worldview. It says in Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." That's effectively what the world wants to do, folks. They want to make us slaves to a worldview very different from a biblical worldview. They want to silence us, maybe even destroy us, because they are against that which the Bible says is true. And the darkness hates the truth because the truth is light and exposes the darkness. Well, we as Christians, we need to not be complacent. And here's some action items that we need to take. First, I want to encourage us to be bold. Stand firm in our faith. It's going to be challenged. We'll be belittled. Universities are doing it all the time. Major media, they're doing it all the time. CNN, MSNBC, etc. We need to stand firm in the truth, not to compromise it, not to water it down. Jesus didn't do that. The apostles didn't do that. Neither should we. Compassion. We need to remember that these individuals out there that are pushing these anti-biblical worldviews, they're blind. They're lost. They don't see. And we need to connect with them with the love and grace of Christ where they are. That means sometimes developing friendships and relationships with people who definitely have a different worldview, who actually may be completely against you. But by exhibiting that love, reaching out to them, you can make a real difference and maybe open a door that may not be open before, where they might be willing to take a second look at Christianity and a biblical worldview. And then wisdom. As we're bombarded from different sides in different ways, at work, at school, in society, culturally, among relatives and family, it's easy to sort of just fall back and just have a certain generic response. You know what we need to do, though? We need to seek wisdom. We want to respond just not at our best. We want to respond at God's best. In order to do that, we need to seek His wisdom. I encourage you to advocate for religious freedom. Support policies and initiatives that encourage the free exercise of religion. So, for example, President Donald Trump, he did the right thing. We need to encourage that. We need to applaud it. We need to let them know in one way or the other that we really appreciate this. It's not just taken for granted, efforts to protect and defend our religious freedom. We need to educate our community. Sometimes communities have no idea what their rights are. You know, for example, there was a school board and a superintendent in Pennsylvania where they recently allowed a queer witch to come on a high school campus and question and survey freshman students at a high school level about sex, sexuality, sex ideas, completely violating federal law. Well, some parents heard about what their rights were, whether from Pacific Justice Institute on our radio program or TV program or from somewhere else. But they heard about it because someone communicated it to them. And then they contacted us at PJI. We were then able to file a formal complaint with the Department of Education. Make a long story short, that queer witch is not coming around, and that superintendent who brought in the queer witch resigned. Knowing our rights, it's important. It makes a difference. And finally, we need to pray for our leaders, folks. Sometimes we talk about praying as just sort of like a generic thing we're always supposed to talk about as Christians. Oh yes, and pray, and pray. I mean pray when I say pray, because I have seen over the years the power of prayer. Not just personally or individually in certain situations or needing for a healing and things. No, I have seen judges change their minds because of prayer. People in authority, people in government, adopting a position or changing their position clearly because of prayer. Prayer is powerful. So let's remember to lift up and pray for all of our leaders, both for those that we perceive are believers and for those that we perceive are not believers. Because God can speak through both. So folks, we've got a lot of challenges facing our nation and a lot of opportunities. But remember this, no matter how great the challenges, always, always keep the faith.